Hey everybody. So this is the second episode in the series. In the couple. This is Vessy Tasheva. She created the Diversity in the Workplace report and also has created Vessy.com, which is a platform for assisting the people leading the charge of the diversity and inclusion, also known as D&I, within their own companies. This platform helps share experiences and somewhat of an emotional support system for the people who are involved in these activities. Emotional support may not necessarily be 100% exactly what it is. It's emotional, mental, tactical. It's, just a gathering where those involved with D&I can, share experiences and help each other do what it is that they're doing better. So I hope you enjoy. Oh, but if you haven't listened to the previous episode with Tom Shaw, that might be useful to listen to first. They're not necessarily dependent upon each other, but it was recorded first, and he introduced me to Vessy. So hope you enjoy. Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Dave Albert. In this show, I talk about technology, building a company as a CTO and co-founder, and have guests to discuss their roles in technology and entrepreneurship. Today, we're joined by Vessy Tasheva. Tom Shaw, the episode... It's probably the episode just before this, where we discussed the Diversity Manifesto, told me I should reach out to you. So thanks for joining us. And can you tell us a bit about yourself and the Diversity in the Workplace report?
Thanks for having me. Sure. So back in January, I published 2019 Diversity in the Workplace report, and it covered 10 companies from 10 countries. On how they approach diversity and inclusion. And as you can imagine, it was very easy to come up with the companies from, Western European countries or the US, etc. And I'm really happy that I committed when I announced that I'm starting to reach out to companies and people, to 10 companies from 10 countries, because it was becoming really, really hard to find those in some of the other countries. But I think it made a really strong point that it's not something, Western, like Western values or whatever. It's universal and it exists everywhere, and we can find the good role models in every country.
So what interested you in creating that report?
I get this one a lot. It was out of frustration. It was out of, I was listening recently to a podcast, where Joel, an old friend of mine, was the guest, and he's a serial entrepreneur. And he was explaining how entrepreneurs really get obsessed with something and they just cannot, I think he used the word compulsive. Mm-hmm. And, I think challenges related to diversity and inclusion, have always bothered me. And I have, pushed or attempted to push the organizations that I have been working with or in to do work around this when there have been problems around it. But the last problems that I was experiencing, it really felt like a compulsion. I just couldn't give up. And I thought, okay, maybe I will not have results in this organization, but it doesn't mean I should give up. So it was that frustration and compulsion, I guess, to use the way Joel was talking about it. And I just wanted to do something constructive about it that can help others. Well, first, help work as a platform for companies that are doing the great work to show their great work. And then for those who are new to the conversation, or they're somewhere on their journey and they're not sure how to make the next step, to be able to learn from someone.
Bless you.
Sorry. Yeah, so it was, so the idea behind the report was to make it to work as a platform for those who are doing the great work, to show the great work that they're doing, for those that are starting their journey to see how to do the next step, and for those who are not on their journey with diversity and inclusion just yet, to see how others are doing that very first step and see that it's not you don't have to wait to be $1 billion company to start with it. Investors actually expect from you to start from day one. So it was really getting the great stories in the report, but also getting the perspectives of investors from early stage, seed stage, and later on, as well as, really showcasing, the companies were really different, not just in terms of their geographical location or origin, but also in terms of their size. The smallest company was of 20 employees. And at the time that I interviewed them, they were established only a year ago. While the oldest company, was Swedbank, and they are 16,000 employees, mostly in Sweden and the neighboring countries and Baltics. And they are established in the 19th century. So completely different. So having this spectrum of, organizations from different industries, from different geographies, sizes, maturity in D&I, maturity as an organization in general, and making it easy for anyone who kind of ends up looking at the report for whatever reason they ended up there, to find someone they can relate to, or maybe find a company they have respected. But you can see there are companies that have 1,000 employees and are literally doing their very first step now, and there are others who have just established the company and are starting to think about it and doing work around it. So there is you can be late to this. Ideally, you start from day one, and that's the easiest moment to start.
But if you didn't start then, today is better than tomorrow.
I compare it to the tech legacy you would have in your product. It's there, and probably things are working, and there are bits that are not ideal. But if you postpone it for too long, and D&I is culture. So if you ignore your culture for too long, and maybe it doesn't mean that you're doing zero, in regards to your culture. Maybe you still have small, rituals or whatever in the organization. So we're not saying it's completely forgotten, but if you're not careful with things, and especially in terms of inclusion and belonging, things can go really wrong in a matter of seconds. And I have seen this happen in organizations that have one type of culture at one moment, and literally within months have a completely different culture, and the way people would describe it, the language has changed dramatically.
So it like how technical debt charges interest, so does cultural debt.
Yeah.
So
and it's I think you objectively know how things are up to one point. And then it becomes a blur because you have been postponing it for so long. Then you're like, well, it's been okay for, let's say, 2 years of having the billing process set up this way, whatever. So maybe we can extend it to another year. But then 6 months into it, something really bad happens. And that's it. You have actually missed the moment, and it will take like maybe a year and a half to go back to somewhat of a good place, and it will be quite compromised.
I see. From the report, what surprising information did you find in it, if any?
Let me think about it.
Oh, we can come back to that one then. What was not a surprise, if you want to start there?
I think it was a surprise that even people who have like over 2 decades of experience in diversity and inclusion, not always feel they have the authority and they have the resources to do the work that they want to do. It's a role that requires access to the leadership team, being part of the leadership team, having authority over the organization, influence over the organization. And these are a lot of requirements. If you're a D&I officer or a volunteer who has kind of like taken over this on top of their main job, main function. These are a lot of requirements to help you get the job done. Does that make sense? I can make it more specific if it's...
It does mostly, but it wouldn't hurt to clarify.
Yeah, so for example, Jason Thompson is the VP of Inclusion and Diversity at Techstars.
Okay.
And, so Techstars have invested in thousands of startups around the world, the huge community of entrepreneurs globally. And, so Jason, is someone at the VP level. He reports directly to the CEO, who has been assigned by the CEO of Techstars, who is also the founder of Techstars. So that gives him access to the, decision maker at the very top, access to like board members, other C-level executives, etc. That doesn't necessarily guarantee that he would have a big enough budget for the work that he needs to do, or that he would have a team. And something that he was sharing. So he used to do D&I for the U.S. Olympics Committee before this role, and he has been in the industry he was actually laughing about it. I was asking him, so, some people talk about belonging, other people talk about diversity and inclusion, others about inclusion and diversity. What's your opinion on all of that? And he was like, oh my God, I've been doing this for 23 years now. And at the start, it was just called Minority Affairs. And then it was called, something else. And then it was called Diversity, and then Diversity and Inclusion, then Inclusion and Diversity, then Belonging. And to be honest, I'm still doing the same job. So I think in the field of D&I, language is important, but it's also unimportant in some way. So it's more about what helps his job is, does he have the resources? Does he have access to the decision makers? Is he a decision maker? Does he have the authority? Does he have influence over the organization? Like literally access to the employees. Because you can be a very important person in a company, but if you don't have a platform to address those people, engage them, and so on, you can go very far. Something that's not surprising is that for an organization to be successful with D&I, it starts with the DNA, really the DNA of the founders, what's at the core of the culture of the organization. And ThoughtWorks were a great example when I was talking to them, because the way they were established, it was around 3 pillars. And one of them was, and they're equally important pillars. The other 2 are very business related. And the third one was to fight for socioeconomic justice. So if they have like an office in the UK, they're doing that in one. way. If they have an office in India, and they actually have 5 or 6 offices there, they're doing it in a different way. And in the context of India, they were actually doing it through pioneering, advocating for LGBTQ rights, which wasn't popular at all. And they did like an official letter to the government, etc. And that was a bunch of years ago. So they took the lead. They were the first corporation to open the conversation about this. So it wasn't just left to the NGOs. So over time, other organizations also petitioned to say, hey, homosexuality is not a crime, because that was still the way it was legally set up in India. Blame the British. And then, it was, again, legacy, from the old days. And, then we had, so then back in September, it was finally removed, like it was delegalized. Is that the word? When something
decriminalized.
Thank you. Decriminalized. Yeah. So it was decriminalized in September, and they played a really critical role. So this is one of the stories in the report on how ThoughtWorks approached it. So if we go back to the criteria on what kind of determines if you will be successful with diversity and inclusion, it's not surprising that the founders, the DNA of the culture, like the core of it, is critical. Then the second piece is, why is DNA important for our specific organization, not for some other organization? Like we kind of all know it could be because it's the right thing to do. It could be because we want our employees to be happy, to be more productive, so to be more engaged. So it helps us with employee retention. That saves costs, etc. Or it could be to collaborate more, to innovate more. Again, business benefits from that. And then it also helps us acquire new markets faster, because we understand our customers better when the employees mirror the customer base. So all of this, kind of accumulates, and it helps you with getting higher revenues, the dream of your CFO, only if executed well. We kind of all know about all of those reasons, but it's important. Why is it the case for your organization? Is it defined? Is it communicated clearly? There are a lot of companies where it's kind of like the CEO gives a call to the HR and says, D&I is a high priority for us this year. We need to start working on it. You have my blessing. Go for it. And, it can be like, oh, that's amazing. We've been waiting for this, etc. But is it clear why it's important? And that can have an extremely negative effect, because it could leave the organization, and that happens very, very often. It can leave the organization feeling like it's a theme for this year. And then the year is over, and people are like, hey, why are we still doing D&I stuff? I thought we were done with inclusion. It was a priority last year. And it's not how it works, right? But it's not for, the average employee to understand that. It's important how we communicate it.
Just like how every year we want to make money.
Yeah. Actually, going back to, Jason, who I mentioned earlier, he was comparing it with sales targets. He's like, the fact that we have hit the target for this month doesn't mean we just all go on vacation and we're done for the rest of the company's life. Yeah.
Okay. That's so interesting that almost just because, well, not just because, but influenced by their company culture, the ThoughtWorks, that actually influenced the reality of a country. It helped to drive change like that.
Yeah.
That they're not 100% focused on that as a company, but their company still made that positive change in the world.
Yeah, and if you look into the story in the report about them, because I was very curious, why would you focus on activism around this specific area of Ovaries. What was a specific event that triggered, their action, attracted their attention, and so on? And they said a few of their employees in India requested to be transferred to the U.S. And when they asked, like, why is that the case? They said, well, we're gay people, we don't feel safe here, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And over time, they were also they were working closely with LGBTQ organizations on the ground, hiring people with, diverse backgrounds in general and profiles. And, they were becoming an employer with more and more LGBTQ people, and they would have trans people as well. And so so imagine you're in a country where being homosexual is criminal, and in the meantime, they're championing trans people at work. That's quite a journey. So they didn't censor it themselves. Quite the opposite. They were trying to understand what are the unique needs that those employees need to feel safe. Like, what's needed? I don't know, is it related to the transport from the neighborhood where they live to the office or whatever it is, so they can accommodate for that? Because if your employee doesn't feel safe, probably they wouldn't be very productive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's amazing. What kind of challenges do you think that you identified companies have that are maybe outside of the realm of just not doing it? So challenges for increasing the diversity and inclusion other than just not wanting it. Am I making the question clear?
Yeah. So the question is, when they're doing something,
yes,
but it's not quite working. Yes. What are their challenges?
Very well put. Thank you.
Yeah, we can change seats for the next one. Well, something that happens quite often, regardless of whether the good work is happening or not, and companies can see results, is that the people who are championing D&I feel very isolated. So this is something where we put a lot of, it's emotional labor, because we deeply care. Most people in this field would really, really care. It affects them in some way, directly or indirectly. For some reason they care. And it's very similar to activism. So in activism, we will talk about, burnout. Because, those people are trying so hard, working so hard, and you don't always see the results. In D&I, it's similar. It's usually on top of your job. Resources are limited. You don't have a lot of time. You don't have a big budget. You don't have a lot of people to help you. The majority of the organization doesn't really understand what you're doing, why you're doing, etc. Or even if they're supportive, they probably don't understand the depth. So you're dealing with really complex problems that you're not necessarily equipped with, because they just happen to be really complex problems. And that can feel very isolating, and it can lead to a burnout. So when I identified this problem, I was thinking, okay, what could I do so that people avoid some of the mistakes that everyone else is kind of doing anyway in this field? Yeah. So while our organizations and situations are extremely unique because of, the culture of the specific company or the industry or our markets and so on, there are many bits that we repeat as mistakes, each of us in our own journey. And I was thinking, okay, how can we avoid those mistakes? Because change initiatives in general, in D&I or not, they fail at a rate of 70%. Wow. So having that in mind, and then the emotional side of things, I was thinking, how about, what if I can provide some kind of emotional support to the D&I champions and create some kind of, I don't know, space or platform or whatever where they can share their learnings or their mistakes, you know? So we can avoid those mistakes. And also we don't get to a burnout. We don't get to their own diversity fatigue, but we actually can have them, you know, come in, heal, and end up doing what they're doing. And this is how I came up with the idea for a global online community for DNI champions. And Tom Shaw, who you mentioned at the start, is a member of the community. There are corporates, NGOs, experts. There are also a few individuals who are very passionate about DNI, like him. And, you know, I mentioned it's global, so it covers a wide range of countries like the US, South Africa, a bunch of countries in Europe, and so on. And it's cross industry. So people have an opportunity to share. It's like an online platform. And for example, Tom posted today amazing resources on empathy and empathy awareness. I was like, wow, this is just such a gem to be able to look at all of this, and he has compiled it for the rest of the community to have access to this. And then for the emotional piece, once a month we have a call and people can join and share, you know, what they have been up to or see what the others are up to. And that could be maybe they learned something, achieved something, launched something, or they just had a really rough week or month. So the healing process is a shared process. So it's like peer-to-peer support. Sometimes I joke and I say that it's AA for DNI champions. So, you know, you would have like a terrible day or whatever. Maybe you have been working really hard on a project and then something goes wrong in the organization and you feel disgusted, maybe betrayed, appalled, or just disappointed. And you want to talk about it and you're not sure who to go to. Because if you go to your colleagues that are not as involved as you are emotionally, they're like, okay, I get it. This is disappointing, but I don't think it's such a big deal. You know what I mean? So it's like telling non-entrepreneurs how hard it is to be an entrepreneur. They'll be like, yeah, let's say parenting is also hard. Why do you complain about this specific thing? And you're like, no, but I'm not saying parenting is easier. It's just, this is different. It's hard in a different way. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's similar. You know, you can have people, you can share with people who will nod, but when they nod, you're like, yeah, they know exactly what I'm going through and it feels better and I can, you know, enjoy my weekend because I just, you know, had a chance to vent out and share it with others. And on the bright side, maybe they had some successes and we can just keep going instead of, people burning out and then leaving, you know, deciding not to champion DNI anymore. Not like their values have changed, but not to invest their time in this.
Yeah. So somebody else can do this now. I've done enough.
And that's fine. That's a personal choice. But what happens is, that does open space for new people to come in, and that's great.
But all their learnings
exactly
and understanding are leaving.
Exactly. So we start from scratch. Yeah. So that's the point of the community. And of course, when people share their, learnings and they share, you know, their journeys, the emotional journey as well, it's much easier to create collaborations because all of this accelerates trust and learning.
How does that group work? Do you have events? Is that what you're saying?
So there are three parts of it. Okay. There is an online platform. Then there are the monthly member calls. Our next one is this Friday. So everyone joins and, you know, we just chat for an hour. It's not too structured in terms of agenda. It's more like, hey, what do you know, tell us what you've been up to. And then, we also have invite-only events, and they're throughout the year. So, for example, this year I had an event in Dublin in January. In April, it was in Sofia in Bulgaria. The next one is in Berlin in September. And the following one will be in San Francisco in January.
Okay, that's great. Because I was going to ask, was this an Ireland thing or an international thing?
Yeah, no. So the community is global. The reports that I do are international.
Yeah.
It will be hard to cover every single country.
Yeah,
Luckily, with the community, there aren't as much constraints around that. And the events are, a few events per year. Of course, it will be hard for every single member to join all of the events, but, at least we can cover a few geographies in this way.
And where is this located for people to find it?
Oh, Vessy.com. So I'm Vessy, the founder of Vessy.com. That's VESSY.com. You can check it out. There are a few things about the community there, the upcoming events. You can find out about the report and all of that, yeah. Yeah,
I'll definitely put all of that in the show notes. You said you've been doing this for quite a number of years. How did you get involved initially?
So, when someone asks me, like, when did you start with this? I say, well, for about a year. But then it's like, that will be like, hey, when did you start with this full time or like having this title, whatever, saying like, I'm a diversity and inclusion champion now, But it all started for me, let me see how many years that is ago. 2007. So actually, towards the end of 2006, I was going to one of my best friends on campus. I would always go to her very angry, complaining about something. But it was always the same thing that I would be complaining about and frustrated about. And that was, what was triggering all of this were my interactions with a close friend of mine who was also my roommate at the time. And I would be like, and she said this and blah, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And my friend just looked at me and she said, are you in love with her? And I said, yeah. And it was literally like, oh shit. So I was 20 at the time. And it was, at that very moment that I realized, oh, actually, I'm not exactly who I always thought I was. And, it was eye-opening and my life felt like it made much more sense. So many experiences before that felt a certain way or thoughts that I had. And now it was like, oh, okay. Now it all makes sense. But it was also an overwhelming wave of thoughts. Oh, now I need to deal with so many things. So, also for context, this is happening in Bulgaria and, Bulgaria can be great for many reasons. It's not exactly the most tolerant place for LGBTQ people, especially back then. So me realizing on that, I think it was like early November or something, in 2006, that I'm gay, I couldn't think of another person on campus, about 1,000 people, who is also gay. So like, I couldn't think of someone I could talk to or, it just felt isolating. In a very organized manner, I made a list of all of the people who I wanted to tell in person. My closest friends, then, some acquaintances that I still wanted to tell in person. Then, obviously my parents and my sister. And then, I reached out to the university. It was like a student magazine run by students. And I said, hey, I want to have a public coming out. Do you want to tell my story? So from like early November, I started checking things off my to-do list of coming out. And then by, let's say, 6th of February in 2008. So about 3 months is the whole thing. I came out publicly in university. And I was like, okay, good. I'm done. That felt very liberating. It was super overwhelming as well because I was scared how people would react, but I was very, I was very fulfilled, and I didn't act out of a place of fear. I was like owning it, and I didn't want to allow anyone to use it as like a little dirty secret or whatever. And I didn't want to doubt myself because like, what if this person knows, or, any of those thoughts. I didn't want this to be part of me. And, I think that was a very, healthy choice. It was fantastic. So since then, I was never like an activist in the way like, part of an NGO, working for an NGO, or like necessarily protesting, whatever busy schedule. I was active through my own life choices and the visibility of those choices. So if there is a company, Christmas party, I would always bring my girlfriend. Or, as soon as I join a company, they would probably know I'm gay already because there would be alumni from my university, and, I assume the news, the word will be out anyway. But, I would still out myself in the first week, whatever. So it was, I think what I was doing was normalizing it through my day-to-day conversations, like, how was your week? And, me and my girlfriend did this. So it was just becoming, normal. And, I think that felt liberating. It felt right. It also meant that, I would have to own the story for a whole community in companies where other people might not be as vocal or comfortable for whatever reasons. It could be their own choice, or it could be the context of their own team, or maybe a little bit of a clash with the culture in the company, etc. So I think that's when my journey with diversity and inclusion started. And what's funny? So my parents are both teachers. My dad is an artist and a teacher, and they had a student in their high school, who was, I think one of her parents was Bulgarian and the other one was from Cuba. And she had a really like beautiful name, and I have never met this person. They would just like mention at home, like, oh, this person, blah, blah. And I was thinking, wow, that's such an exciting life. It's very, very interesting. And I just have a normal family, a regular family, regular life. And then who knew that actually, a few years later, I'll be like, things are not as regular as I thought. Yeah.
What practical things can small companies, startups that just have a few people, what can they do to help ingrain that within their DNA to make sure that they don't get in that situation where they have that cultural debt in a year or two?
Yeah, especially in a small company when you can do things that are not scalable. I think one-on-ones are critical. And not just the one-on-one, for us to talk about the operational bits and stuff. Like as we are trying to figure out product market fit, or how to grow the business, or what marketing channels work for us, we are also trying to figure out like who you are and who I am. In many startups, people are also very young, and getting to know ourselves can be the opportunity, or it could be our failure as a startup. I have seen companies that have really done a great job connecting with their employees on a deeply emotional level, understanding their challenges. Like many of the one-on-ones that I have had with people who have been reporting to me are not really about work. We will talk about anything but work. It could be like, you know, how the breakup with their partner went, or what relationship they had with their parents. And you know, someone will be like, yeah, but that's a work environment. Why are you talking about this? This is a waste of time. Well, actually, it's not, because it's usually like, maybe if you went through a breakup, you're experiencing self-doubt right now. And it's really hard to regain your confidence to be excellent at your job, even if you're excellent in your job in general. Or the dynamics that you have with your parents are probably affecting the dynamics with some of the employees. And if you're not aware, you're just repeating those dynamics. And it doesn't matter in what type of role you were in those dynamics. It feels repetitive, and that's draining. And if you don't talk about it, if you don't understand that it's happening, but it's also not happening, because these are not your parents or siblings or, you know, whatever your previous experience has been. You can't unfold this and solve it and work with it. So you're just stuck. And I think that's something that really limits our potential as professionals. It's hard to be a manager if you haven't dealt with your own shit. And it doesn't happen overnight. So when people were in their 20s in a startup, a lot of the challenges can be around those things, just getting to know themselves. And one-on-ones can be critical, and they're both helpful for that very purpose for both sides. The startup founder, or, you know, maybe it's like the tech lead, and the other side. And for those who are more experienced, let's say someone who's in their 40s, but they have people who are in their 20s reporting to them, it's an opportunity to understand each other's perspectives. And it feeds very much into the D&I story. You could use it as reverse mentoring. You can use it to just get completely new ideas. For example, my girlfriend is 10 years younger than me. And the way she uses social media, or just her phone in general, is completely different from the way I use it. So for most people, we do look the same age. We roughly look somewhere in the middle of the age gap that we have. But our behavior is extremely different in regards to technology. And so imagine if you are on a team where people have 20 years or more of an age gap, you can learn so much from each other, because the more experienced person, they have the wisdom, they have a different pace, they have tried so many more things. They don't necessarily have all of the answers, regardless of what they're telling you. You know, maybe they're aware of it and they talk about the vulnerabilities, or they don't. You know, it's their choice, it's their right. But on the other side, when you're young and energized and you try more new technology or whatever, or you just go out more, you would have different ideas, and ideas that probably the other person wouldn't have, but you could also learn from their pace, because you just maybe want to do a lot of things, and that's also not scalable. So, you know, let's meet somewhere in the middle, have a steady pace, and try new things, and use the knowledge of, you know, maybe a couple of decades in the workforce, but also, not just do things the way we do things here. Either, you know. That's
one thing that we try really hard within our company to do, is to make sure that we don't do anything because that's what we've done. I mean, you know, we're still young, the company. I'm not. I'm in my 40s now, and I barely know myself. I try really hard to keep learning and growing, but I don't know anything. I can tell you a million mistakes I've made over time, and I try not to repeat the mistakes, but nobody knows anything. We're all just kind of floating along, trying our best. So I don't know what age you get to be a grown-up, but I sure don't feel like one yet.
I think it took me about 10 years of work experience to figure out that no one knows what they're doing. They're just, trying their best, and it doesn't matter if they're the CEO of a bank or, the youngest employee in a startup or whatever. Everyone is just trying to make it work.
It's like in school, I don't know if your books were like this, but the teacher's edition always had the answers in the back of the book.
No, we did not have that.
Okay, well, that's what I guess I always assumed being a grown-up is that you had the answers. Nobody's got any answers. Everybody's just got questions and probably that's not going to work, because every other time I've tried that, I've fallen on my face. So I guess hoping that there were answers in the back of the book when you got older would help. And so far, I haven't found the answers, but I'm not going to stop looking.
I think it's a very good comparison. I felt that, like in school, if you study hard, and you understand the logic of things, you can solve a math problem, or, you can write an essay. So with some discipline and maybe self-reflection, whatever, some hard work, you can make it. And then, starting, my first job and then second and so on, I've been in quite a few companies. You actually figure out that that's not how it works. It isn't just about the hard work or the discipline. It's much, much more complicated. No one tells you, because in school, if you do X and Y, you get the score.
Yep.
But in life, if you do, X and Y, it actually changes. Maybe this time will work, another time won't work, and it's not everything is about A/B testing and experiments, like marketing experiments and so on. It's just much more complex. So I think I also felt similar to you, a bit cheated, that I knew how things work in life with hard work and discipline, things happen. And I was like, nope, it's something else. And I don't know what I'm doing. So let's hope for the best.
Absolutely. How can you help increase the diversity and inclusion for roles that you don't really get that many diverse applicants for? So I've posted a number of technical jobs, and there are very few female applicants. Very few. Even interviewing 100% of the female applicants, there's still maybe 1% of the interviewees. So what can we do?
So it sounds like where to post your job ads and get the other part of the talent.
Yeah.
So how about just go somewhere else? Because if we post our jobs in the places where we don't get, candidates from underrepresented groups, diverse candidates, whatever you want to call it, then that's just the wrong place to get them.
Yeah.
We cannot, if you post one job ad and you get 3, let's say, female engineers, it's not like if you post 9 or 3 jobs, then you get 3 times more, etc., etc. I probably did the math wrong. I'm actually good in math. Just, I think you got the logic. Ignore the bits.
I know what you're saying.
But just probably the female engineers hang out somewhere else.
Okay.
So that would be one thing. Gotcha. So do you go to those places? Do you know where they are?
I don't know where they are.
Do you talk to them? So that's right.
Yeah.
So, before we started the episode, you said that you have some women on your team.
Yeah.
So where do they go? Literally, where do they hang out? And maybe not only networking or tech events or startup events. even if you want, maybe like going to bars where they hang out would be a bit weird. But I think you see where I'm where I'm going. Like, if it was your customers, you would go where they go. You ask them, how did you hear about me? But also, what podcasts do you listen to? So maybe you can, advertise on those podcasts. So similarly with them, like, treat them as a segment, the way you treat a segment among your customers, treat them as like, different segments in, among your candidates, and see where those candidates specifically come from. Are there, universities that, would give you a better reach, or do you want to mentor like startup weekends, or, whatever works for you for a specific role? But yes, you won't probably get enough, diverse candidates as applicants. And that would happen for more than one reason. It isn't just about how many people are in, the talent pipeline, whatever. Men are more likely to apply, and they apply for jobs even when they don't meet the requirements. Something that you could do is see how you can make your job descriptions more inclusive. So I'm not just talking about the language that you use. It could be, how many requirements do you have? How about just list really the absolutely must-haves? So instead of putting down 10 requirements and then 5, for like extra, bonus points type of requirements, how about you just put 5, the 5 that actually matter to you? To be honest, it's probably not 15. There are probably 5 critical ones. So put those 5. Because when men look at those requirements, they're like, I have 2 or 3. I'll be fine with the rest, and they apply. When women look at it, they're like, oh, that's 10 plus 5 for bonus points. I meet a few of the, the main requirements, none of the bonus points. They obviously will give it to someone who has the bonus points. I don't cover all of the requirements, so they'll just skip. But also, using more masculine language, like, talking about achievements, targets, etc., versus talking about more feminine language, such as collaborate, help, and so on. There are many tools online that can help you neutralize the language a little bit, so it feels more inviting. I would say look at yourself really, like, in the mirror. Where do you go? Which are the events where you go? Just, sitting in the office waiting for applications will not change the results, because you're doing the same thing. Yeah. And in marketing or sales or engineering, if we keep doing the same thing, the results won't change. So why do we think that in hiring it will change? And then, focus on the job ad as well. Simplify. That doesn't mean to decrease the requirements, but to make it more accessible. I think that would be a good starting point. But talk to people and see what's stopping them. Imposter syndrome is huge. And another thing is, check your own biases. There are online tools that can help you with that. But also, like, educate yourself on unconscious biases in general. See, like, yes, you're, a young startup, but how can you, like, is there a process? How consistent are the experiences that the different applicants have? Because usually in a startup, we might be like, hey, I'll have a coffee with this candidate. We ask them, 5 questions that are very different from the 5 questions we ask the next candidate. And then it's hard to compare them. And then it's completely up to, like, culture fit, which is, it can be first based on a gut feeling instead of actually comparing values. And culture fit can become an excuse for unconscious biases that we have. So, I think that will be also very helpful. So what's your process, and what changes can you make so that it's not only, let's say, male engineers who decide if this person goes from stage 1 to stage 2 and so on, in this particular example.
That's really good information. is there anything else about your work recently that we haven't covered? Because I've kind of run out of questions for my list. I mean, I could talk to you for hours. I really could. But, we're nearing an hour now. Yeah. So if there's anything key that I missed out on asking you.
I would be curious, and that's more for the listeners. As we're entering the second half of the year, I would be curious who among you are doing work related to D&I in some capacity. I'll be working on the next report very soon, the one for 2020. And it will be feel free to reach out, and it will be great to talk to some of you, and hear how you approach things. Cause these are diversity and inclusion is such a complicated area, with so many variables, so many layers. And it's very helpful when we can show how it's tackled in different situations, and not tackled in the way done. Now we're done, and that's it. Let's see what people are trying. So feel free to reach out at Vessy@Vessy.com and just give me a shout out.
Great. Yeah, I'll add all your details. And so Vessy.com is the best place to get you, or is there a social media platform that, are you on Twitter or LinkedIn?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, LinkedIn, all of the places. But Twitter, LinkedIn would be probably best, or just over email. Okay. Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This was really good. I learned quite a few things that I think we can actually do, especially when we go looking for additional engineers. Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure. And thank you all for listening. Until next time, remember, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.